Welcome back to Quantum Quest, where we dive into the deepest mysteries of physics and discover realities stranger than fiction. Today, we're exploring one of the most mind-bending phenomena in the universe, a connection that transcends distance, defies intuition, and suggests reality might be far more interconnected than we ever imagined. This is the story of quantum, the twin planets that share a single consciousness across light years of empty space. In 2445, humanity's quantum telescope array detected something that shouldn't be possible. Two planets orbiting different stars, separated by 47 light years of space, were quantum entangled. Not just a few particles, not just molecules, entire planets. Every atom in perfect quantum correlation with its counterpart across an impossible distance. When sensors detected a particle spin on one planet, its twin on the other planet instantly exhibited the opposite spin. Not after 47 years, when light could travel between them, instantly, simultaneously, as if the space between them didn't exist. The scientific community was in chaos. Quantum entanglement was well understood at the particle level. Einstein famously called it spooky action at a distance, disturbed by how two particles could remain connected regardless of separation. But entanglement was fragile. The slightest interaction with the environment destroyed it. Heat, light, vibration, anything would break the quantum connection. That's why quantum computers had to be cooled to a near absolute zero and isolated from all interference. The idea that entire planets exposed to stellar radiation, cosmic rays, and countless environmental factors could maintain entanglement was impossible. Yet the data was undeniable. Dr. Sarah Chen was a quantum physicist who had spent 30 years studying entanglement. She'd helped develop the quantum communication networks that allowed instantaneous data transfer between Earth and its colonies. But those networks worked with carefully isolated particles in controlled conditions. What she was seeing in the telescope data defied everything she knew. These planets weren't isolated. They were active, dynamic, geologically alive. And somehow, impossibly, they were perfectly entangled. The expedition to investigate took 20 years, traveling at near light speed to reach the first planet, designated Quantum Alpha. As the ship, the Heisenberg paradox, entered orbit, the crew saw a world that looked almost Earth-like. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in familiar patterns. But something was off. The colors weren't quite right. The green of the vegetation had an unusual tint, almost violet. The blue of the oceans seemed to shift between shades in ways that didn't match the lighting conditions. And the clouds moved in patterns that seemed synchronized, as if following choreography rather than random weather dynamics. Dr. Chen deployed quantum sensors across the planet's surface. The readings confirmed what the telescope had detected from 47 light years away. Every particle on this planet was entangled with a corresponding particle on quantum beta, the twin planet orbiting a star dozens of light years distant. When an electron in an atom on alpha was measured, its spin state instantly correlated with its entangled partner on beta. Not probably correlated, not statistically correlated. Perfectly, instantaneously correlated across a distance that should take 47 years to cross at light speed. To understand why this is extraordinary, you need to understand what quantum entanglement actually means. When two particles become entangled, they form a single quantum system. Measuring one particle instantly determines the state of the other, regardless of distance. Einstein thought this violated the cosmic speed limit, that information was traveling faster than light. But quantum mechanics says no information actually travels. The particles were never separate. They were always one system existing in two locations simultaneously. Measuring one doesn't send a signal to the other. Measuring one reveals information about the whole system, and that revelation is instantaneous because the system was never divided in the first place. For individual particles, this was strange but manageable. But for entire planets, every atom in the oceans entangled with atoms in distant oceans, every molecule in the atmosphere paired with molecules in an atmosphere light years away, every particle in every living thing connected to counterparts on a world that hadn't been visible in the night sky for longer than human civilization had existed. The complexity was staggering. The implications were profound. When the landing team touched down on Quantum Alpha, they immediately noticed something bizarre about the life forms. The planet had a thriving ecosystem. Forests covered the continents. Oceans teemed with creatures. But nothing behaved the way evolution should have shaped it. Predators and prey moved in synchronized patterns, as if following a script. Plants responded to stimuli before those stimuli occurred. Leaves turning towards sunlight that hadn't yet risen. Roots growing toward water that hadn't yet flowed into the area. Birds flew in formations that required knowledge of air currents that wouldn't exist for hours. Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's biologist, was baffled. Evolution shaped organisms to respond to their environment based on past patterns and present stimuli. But the life on Quantum Alpha was responding to future events. No, not future events. Events that were happening simultaneously on Quantum Beta. Somehow, the organisms on Alpha had access to information from Beta, information that was being transmitted instantaneously through quantum entanglement. The breakthrough came when Dr. Chen discovered that the entanglement wasn't random. It was structured, organized, deliberately maintained by the planets themselves. Deep beneath the surface of both worlds, massive crystalline structures generated quantum fields that stabilized the entanglement, protecting it from environmental decoherence. These structures weren't natural. They were ancient technology, billions of years old, built by a civilization that had mastered quantum mechanics at scales humanity couldn't comprehend. The structures did something remarkable. They didn't just entangle individual particles. They entangled information patterns. Specifically, they entangled the information patterns that constituted consciousness. Every living thing on Quantum Alpha had a quantum twin on Quantum Beta. Not a genetic twin, a consciousness twin. Two bodies, separated by light years, sharing a single stream of awareness. When a creature on Alpha saw something, its twin on Beta experienced the same perception simultaneously. When an organism on Alpha felt something, its counterpart on Beta felt it too. They weren't two beings with similar experiences. They were one being experiencing existence through two bodies in two locations at once. This explained the bizarre behaviors. The plant turning towards sunlight that hadn't risen was responding to sunlight its twin was already experiencing on Beta, where the sun had risen hours earlier in local time. The predator, moving in coordination with prey, was literally experiencing both perspectives simultaneously, feeling both the hunter's anticipation and the hunter's fear. It wasn't precognition, it wasn't telepathy, it was unified consciousness distributed across impossible distance through quantum entanglement. Dr. Chen made contact with the most advanced species on Quantum Alpha, beings that called themselves the Gemini. They were humanoid, roughly 7 feet tall, with translucent skin that revealed the bioluminescent patterns of their nervous systems. But the most striking thing about them was their complete lack of surprise at anything. They never startled, they never expressed confusion, they never asked questions to clarify misunderstandings, because they experienced everything from two perspectives simultaneously. The Gemini leader, whose name translated as dual mind, explained their existence through the translation systems. We are not separate from our twins on Beta. We are not communicating with them. We are them, and they are us. When you speak to me, you speak to two bodies simultaneously. When I answer, two mouths speak as one. We have never known separation. We have never experienced the loneliness of singular consciousness. We are and have always been two and one at the same time. Dr. Chen struggled to comprehend this. How could a consciousness exist in two places at once? The Gemini didn't just share information, they shared existence itself. Their sense of self wasn't divided between two bodies. It was unified across two bodies. They didn't think of themselves as individuals with twins. They thought of themselves as singular beings with two forms. To them, the 47 light years between their bodies was irrelevant. Distance had no meaning when your consciousness existed as a quantum state distributed across space. The science behind this was both elegant and mind-bending. Consciousness, most neuroscientists agreed, emerged from patterns of information processing in the brain. Specific configurations of neural activity corresponded to specific thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. The Gemini brains weren't just entangled at the particle level, they were entangled at the information level. The pattern of neural activity that constituted a thought in one brain was quantum correlated with the pattern in its twin brain. Not similar, not synchronized. Identical. Because they were the same pattern existing in two locations through quantum entanglement. This meant the Gemini experienced reality in ways humans couldn't imagine. They perceived events from two locations simultaneously, giving them a natural stereoscopic view of the universe. They never experienced loneliness because they were never alone. They never feared death of the body because their consciousness would persist in the twin body. They never made decisions based on incomplete information because they always had at least two perspectives on every situation. But they also faced challenges humans didn't. They could never develop individual identity in the way humans understood it. Every Gemini was eternally connected to their twin, experiencing their twin's every thought and sensation. There was no privacy, no secrets, no inner world that belonged to the self alone. They were permanently transparent to themselves, which meant they were permanently transparent to their twin, which meant they were permanently transparent to everyone because all Gemini understood what it meant to be perfectly known by another. Dr. Chen asked Dual Mind if this bothered them, this total lack of privacy. The Gemini leader's bioluminescent patterns shifted in what the translator identified as gentle amusement. Privacy is the fear of being known. We have never had that fear because we have always been known. Completely, utterly. Our twin knows every thought, every feeling, every sensation we experience, and we know theirs. We cannot hide. We cannot pretend. We cannot be other than what we are. You would call this terrifying. We call this freedom. The expedition team spent months studying the Gemini and their entangled existence. They discovered that the quantum connection went beyond consciousness. The planets themselves were entangled. When a volcano erupted on Alpha, seismic activity increased on Beta. When a storm formed on one world, atmospheric patterns shifted on the other. The planets weren't just hosting entangled life. They were entangled systems, each one influencing the other through quantum correlation. Dr. Marcus made a disturbing discovery. The entanglement was degrading. The ancient technology maintaining it was failing after billions of years. Small fluctuations had begun appearing in the quantum correlation. Moments where the connection weakened briefly before restabilizing. The Gemini knew this. They had known for generations. They were living on borrowed time, waiting for the day when the entanglement would finally collapse and they would become truly separate beings for the first time in their species' history. Dual Mind explained their situation with a calmness that seemed impossible given the stakes. When the entanglement fails, we will become two. Every Gemini will lose half of themselves. Every consciousness will split into separate streams. We will experience loneliness for the first time, privacy for the first time, independence for the first time. We do not know if we will survive this. We evolved as entangled beings. Our brains developed to process two streams of sensory inputs simultaneously. Our sense of self is predicated on existing in two places at once. When we become singular, we may lose ourselves entirely. Dr. Chen immediately began working on a solution. If the ancient technology was failing, perhaps human technology could replace it. Humanity had developed quantum entanglement systems for communication. Could those systems be scaled up to maintain planetary entanglement? She spent weeks analyzing the alien structures, learning how they generated and stabilized quantum fields across light years of distance. The technology was far beyond human capability, but the principles were understandable. It used the quantum vacuum itself as a medium, exploiting zero-point energy fluctuations to maintain coherence between entangled particles. The key was the crystalline structures. They weren't generating entanglement. They were protecting it, shielding the entangled particles from environmental decoherence. The entanglement itself had been established billions of years ago when the planets formed. They had coalesced from the same protoplanetary disk around a binary star system. Every particle in one planet was born entangled with its counterpart in the other. Then something catastrophic had happened. The binary stars had gone supernova, ejecting both planets into space. They had drifted for eons, captured by different stars, ending up light years apart. But the ancient civilization had recognized the unique quantum state of these ejected worlds and built the preservation systems before their own extinction. Now those systems were dying, and when they died, something unique in the universe would be lost. Two worlds that had existed as one would become two. A species that had never known separation would experience it for the first time. A form of consciousness that transcended space itself would collapse into isolated individuals. Unless Dr. Chen could find a way to repair or replace the failing technology. She made a proposal that was both brilliant and controversial. Human quantum technology couldn't match the scale or sophistication of the ancient systems, but it didn't need to. The entanglement already existed. It just needed protection from decoherence. What if they could use a distributed network of smaller quantum field generators, thousands of them across both planets, working together to maintain coherence? Each one would be much simpler than the ancient monoliths, but together they could form a net that would hold the entanglement stable. The Gemini agreed immediately. They had no choice. The alternative was the end of their existence as they understood it. So for 3 years, human engineers worked alongside Gemini builders, installing quantum field generators across two worlds separated by light years. The coordination was challenging but possible because the Gemini could communicate instantly with their twins. Instructions given on Alpha were immediately understood on Beta. Problems discovered on one world were solved on both simultaneously. The two construction teams worked as one crew, separated by space but united by consciousness. When the last generator was installed, Dr. Chen activated the network. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the quantum sensors registered a surge in entanglement coherence. The network was working. The degradation stopped. The correlation stabilized. The Gemini would remain entangled. Their consciousness would remain unified. Their existence as two and one would continue. Dual Mind approached Dr. Chen after the activation. The Gemini leader's bioluminescent patterns showed something the translator had never registered before. Gratitude so profound it had no direct translation. You have given us our life. Not in the sense of preventing death, in the sense of preserving the nature of our existence. We would have survived the collapse of entanglement. Our bodies would have lived, but we would have died. The we, that is two and one, would have ceased to exist, replaced by separate beings who would have been haunted by the memory of unity. You have saved us from that fate. Dr. Chen felt tears streaming down her face. She had spent her career studying quantum mechanics, learning the mathematics, understanding the principles. But standing here, looking at a being whose consciousness transcended space itself, she understood something equations couldn't capture. Quantum entanglement wasn't just physics, it was possibility. The possibility that connection could be more than proximity, that consciousness could be more than isolation, that existence itself could transcend the boundaries humans assumed were fundamental. The expedition returned to Earth with more than data. They brought back a revelation. The Gemini proved that consciousness wasn't bound to individual brains in individual bodies. It could exist as a distributed quantum state. It could be unified across impossible distances. It could transcend the limitations of space itself. This meant human consciousness, currently isolated in individual skulls, might not be fundamentally limited to that isolation. With sufficient understanding of quantum mechanics and sufficient technology, humans might one day achieve what the Gemini had naturally: connection beyond communication, unity beyond proximity, consciousness that existed not in isolated islands but as an interconnected ocean. Dr. Chen published her findings in a paper titled Entangled Consciousness: When Quantum Mechanics Becomes Awareness. In it, she argued that the Gemini represented not just an interesting biological phenomenon, but a new category of existence. They proved that consciousness could use quantum entanglement as a substrate. That awareness could exist as a quantum state distributed across space. That the boundaries humans experience between self and other, between here and there, between now and then, were not fundamental features of consciousness, but artifacts of biology that had evolved without access to quantum coherence. The implications rippled through human civilization. Philosophers debated whether the Gemini were individuals or collectives. Neuroscientists studied how consciousness could emerge from quantum correlation. Technologists began developing quantum interfaces that might allow humans to experience temporary entanglement, to feel what it was like to exist in two places simultaneously. Ethicists argued about whether it would be right to create entangled human consciousness, whether the loss of privacy and independence would be worth the gain of connection and perspective. But perhaps the most profound impact was psychological. The Gemini proved that loneliness wasn't inevitable, that isolation wasn't the natural state of consciousness, that existence didn't have to be a solitary journey through space and time. Somewhere in the universe, 47 light years apart, two planets hosted beings who never experienced the fundamental aloneness that humans accepted as unavoidable. They were always connected, always united, always experiencing existence together, even when physically separated by distances that would take lifetimes to cross. Dr. Chen visited Quantum Alpha one more time before she died, 30 years after the quantum network had been installed. She was elderly now, her body failing, her time limited. She stood in the crystalline chamber with Dual Mind, who had also aged but remained unified with their twin across the void. She asked the question that had haunted her for decades: what is it like to never be alone, to always exist as two and one? Dual Mind's patterns shifted through colors that represented deep thought, distant memory, and something the translators struggled to capture, but Dr. Chen understood as love. Imagine, the Gemini said, that every moment of your life, someone who is you is experiencing something else, somewhere else. When you are sad, you are also happy. When you are afraid, you are also brave. When you are lost, you are also found, because your twin is experiencing the opposite and you are experiencing both. You are never stuck in one perspective. You are never trapped in one mood. You are never limited to one location or one experience. You are always more than you seem, always larger than you feel, always connected to yourself in ways that make loneliness impossible. Dr. Chen closed her eyes and tried to imagine it. Tried to conceive of consciousness that existed in two places simultaneously. Tried to feel what it would be like to never be cut off from another perspective. And in that moment, she understood. The Gemini weren't just another form of intelligent life. They were proof that consciousness could be structured differently than humans had assumed. That awareness didn't have to be singular and isolated. That existence could be shared at the deepest level through the quantum fabric of reality itself. She died 3 weeks later, peacefully, with that understanding as her final gift from a lifetime of studying the quantum world. And on quantum beta, 47 light years away, Dual Mind's twin felt a distant echo of grief for the human who had saved them, and simultaneously felt gratitude that transcended distance, time, and the boundaries between separate beings. Because in the quantum universe, some connections are real in ways that transcend space itself. Some relationships exist not despite distance, but beyond distance. And some truths can only be understood by accepting that reality is stranger, more connected, and more beautiful than our limited human perspective usually allows us to see. Thanks for joining us on Quantum Quest. If this story changed how you think about consciousness, connection, or the nature of existence itself, leave a comment below. Do you think humans could ever achieve entangled consciousness? Would you want to share awareness with another being across impossible distance? What would it feel like to never be alone in your own mind? Hit that subscribe button for more journeys into the quantum mysteries that make reality stranger than we ever imagined. Until next time, keep questioning. And remember, in the quantum universe, separation might be an illusion and connection might be the deepest truth of existence itself.